In the age of making gaming reviews on the internet, you have to prioritize which game is worth your time. Normally, I tend to shy away from reviewing role-playing games, or even games with some sort of RPG element to them. Now, it's not because my interest in the genre is beginning to wane, but simply from the fact that RPGs take a long time to finish. I'm a big advocate of playing through an entire game before making a review, which is why my videos take so long to come out. In the time span it takes me to finish one RPG, I could have gone through 2 or 3 other games in a different genre. But every so often, I do get that RPG itch. The thought of embarking on an epic adventure brings back so many wonderful memories from my early days of gaming. Then I remember the 50+ hours I'm gonna have to spend, and I quickly lose interest. Why can't RPGs be short, but at the same time offer everything else an RPG is known for? That's where Child of Light comes in. A game clocking in at around 10 to 12 hours. Maybe a little more if you're going for full completion. Does it have all the earmarks of what makes an awesome and memorable RPG? Here's my review of Child of Light for the PlayStation Vita. As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. Child of Light truly is a spectacle to behold. It has a very hand-drawn, classical Disney kind of look. It's charming, it's magical, ominous yet serene, like being in a lucid fairy tale dream. There are so many layers in the 2D artwork. Characters move gracefully around the screen, with objects and backgrounds in perfect harmony with each other. You feel like you've been transported to another world. In the foreground, trees and branches obscure your line of sight. Backgrounds display a haunting but welcoming demeanor. Look a little further in the distance and you can see a lone giant wandering around aimlessly. This is just one example of the many visual highlights. There's also a wonderful use of color as well. Soft and subtle, reminding you of a watercolored painting ready to be framed and hung up on a wall. Character animation is smooth throughout. Whether you're running on foot or flying through the skies, not one area looks neglected. One thing that really stood out to me was the hair animation. I think it looks pretty cool. Visuals look just as good when you're in battle. The way Aurora can barely lift up her sword, or how her crown falls to the ground when taking a hit, helps make combat feel that more tangible. Supporting cast members look just as good, each with their own style and flair. Attack animations and magic spells look great too. I just wish there was more of them. Other than that, the game is definitely a looker. It's rare to come across a title with an art style this unique. The game controls great, for the most part. I like that you can fly almost anywhere, but it can be difficult when you want to land on a specific platform, as sometimes you'll fly right past it. There's good use of the front touchscreen as well. Puzzles that involve having to shine a light onto the background works as it should. I also found that controlling Igniculus with the front touchscreen works just as well, if not better than the right analog stick. The only problem I have with Igniculus is that sometimes you have to be right on top of the enemy in order to blind them with your light. If you're slightly off the mark, the attack won't register, which will go unnoticed since there's so much happening at once, leaving you to waste precious light magic. An enchanting score accompanies you throughout your adventure, and not once does it disappoint. Beautiful piano melodies remind you of a faraway land that you thought only existed in your dreams. It's the stuff storybook legends are made of. At times, the score can give off a gloomy kind of vibe. It's magical, but also sad. Immersion is also further enhanced with noise coming from the background. Birds chirping, wolves howling, and trees swaying in the wind provides for an unforgettable experience. One thing I thought could have helped add a lot of personality are voiceovers for the supporting characters. With that being said, there are a few minor technical setbacks. Music can sometimes cut in and out during combat, with audio getting a little distorted and scratchy as well. They don't happen often, and they don't do enough to tarnish what is otherwise an exceptional musical score. The game starts with you taking control of Aurora, a little girl who falls asleep and awakens in the magical land of Lemuria. You have no idea how you got there, but somehow must find your way back home. Gameplay consists of simple platforming with enemy encounters scattered throughout. Combat is a mix of turn-based and real-time. You select a command, and you wait for that command to be executed. Rinse and repeat. Simple enough, but the exciting part is that while you're waiting for your command to be executed, it's possible to be interrupted by an enemy. If this happens, then you're sent back to the beginning and have to initiate the command all over again. The bright side to this is that you, or anyone else in your party, can also interrupt an enemy's command. Battles soon turns into a tense game of tug-of-war, with each side trying to get their attack out first. It's fun, it's fast, and it keeps you on your toes, making you plan 2 or 3 steps ahead of your enemy. You also have a little firefly helper in the form of Igniculus. You control him with either the right analog stick or the front touch. During combat, he can be used to heal party members or even halt the actions of other enemies, so an interruption is less likely to happen. Overall, I felt the combat was pretty enjoyable, but I do have a few complaints. You're limited with having only 2 characters on screen at a time, which I personally think limits the use of some defensive magic. What's the point of casting Cure All or Protect All when it only affects 2 characters? You're less tempted to switch in another member because you'll have to cast the magic spell all over again for that new character. Speaking of other characters in your party, they can be switched in at any given time, but I found myself just sticking to the 2 I was most familiar with. I rarely use more than 2 characters, and only occasionally would I need to switch in a third if I was ever low on health or if I had to throw out a specific elemental attack. But those moments don't occur often, and I can remember probably 1 instance where that only happened. Another thing worth mentioning is that all characters acquire XP regardless of whether they participate in battle or not, further proving the fact that I really did not need to switch in another party member. Another complaint I have is the Oculi crafting system. You mix certain gems together to create bigger gems, which in turn help boost your character's stats when equipped. The system isn't completely useless, but I felt it could have had a bigger impact on your character's abilities. Status effects are so minuscule, you'll wonder if it's even worth equipping. Another problem is that outside of combat, it's hard to determine who has what gem. And since I was so inclined with using just 2 characters throughout my journey, I didn't even feel the need to equip any of the other characters with gems either. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about every line of dialogue in the game rhyming. This feels more like a distraction than anything else. I think the story would have been a lot easier to understand had they just kept it simple. And as beautiful as the town and villages are, you don't spend much time in them. Exploration is kept to a minimum. Puzzles are easy to solve. You've got your simple push and pull crate mechanic with occasional shine the light to open up doorways. Characters you meet offer additional side quests, which in all honesty, I couldn't even tell the difference from the main story objectives. I must say I'm a big fan of the skill tree system. With newly acquired XP, you can decide what abilities you want to work towards. It's sort of like a very streamlined version of Final Fantasy X's Sphere Grid. And now for my biggest complaint. The game was too short. Let me explain. I didn't care enough for the characters. There wasn't enough time for me to care. It's the game's own blessing and detriment. I got what I asked for. An RPG that didn't take ages to complete, but in return missed out on what makes an RPG great. The characters and story. The game doesn't grow tedious and repetitive, but with such a short playtime for an RPG, that kind of connection with the characters isn't possible. At least for me, that is. Maybe it was the short playtime, or maybe it was the hard to follow rhyming dialogue. The story is by no means bad, but it is far from being memorable. Regardless, I still think you should play Child of Light. Its art design is second to none, its musical score is unforgettable, and its combat, although limited, is fun, fast, and addictive. And with a new Game Plus, you can play the game on a harder difficulty with all your previous stats. Child of Light for the PlayStation Vita comes recommended.